baby, ain't that sad? I lose my baby, ain't that sad? Well, you know you can't spend what you ain't got. You can't lose what you ain't never had. Well, you know you can't spend what you ain't got. You can't lose what you ain't never had.
Take your fancy just now.
Well, that's good. Yeah. That's a really sweet.
Let's get the word.
Yeah, really good. Yeah.
No changes on that.
Am I wrong?
Oh.
Fall in love with you. Tell me, am I wrong? Fall in love with you. While your other man was out there, cheating and lying, standing all over you. Am I wrong? So tight. Am I wrong?
How are we going?
Much like just stretch right in. 1, 2, 3.
I'm a rambler. Hey, my home is in no woman's town. I'm a rambler. I ain't the fool that I used
The most popular form of popular music was the big band stuff from the posh hotels. Ambrose and his orchestra from the Mayfair Hotel, somebody else, Sidney Lipton from the Dorchester and all that. The dance bands were the big thing in those days. Musicians played in big bands, slaving over a hot score to earn their money, and then went down and played jazz after hours for nothing, for the love of it.
Bear in mind that in the 40s, the jazz scene was these clubs where people played records and discussed it in serious sort of tones, you know. There was no blues scene. There was half a dozen people in Britain who knew what it was. It began in the very late 40s, really, but it didn't get to a big scale with the public until, I suppose, really, when we started up in the band. 53, we came Collier. 54, I took the band over. About then.
The first jazz band that I ever saw was a Freddie Randall jazz band. Very shortly after that, I saw the Humphrey Lyttelton band, which was much more sort of what I would call authentic.
When I got to London, I discovered there was this movement led by Humphrey Lyttelton, the revivalist movement, not the traditional movement, playing jazz of the kind that was recorded in the 20s in Chicago. Oliver, Armstrong, Morton and so on.
It was a revivalist thing in the sense that it was, those of us who played it, and I was one of them, had this idea that we were going to pick up where Jerry Roll Morton and all those people left off.
Woke up this morning when chickens was crowing for day. Felt on the right side of my pillow, my man had gone away. By his pillow, he left a note reading, "I'm sorry, Jane, you got my goat, no time to marry, no time to settle down." I'm a young woman and ain't done running round.
The revivalists, for instance, wouldn't tolerate bebop.
Really?
No. Oh. And the bebop people wouldn't tolerate revivalism. They called us mouldy figs.
Yeah.
And then came Collier, and that again sort of sub-split the split anyway.
Ken was a strange man, actually. Great trumpet.
He's a man who's been I feel, rather misrepresented by many people who claim to represent his ideals and everything else. And I first knew Ken, indeed, when my first band, which was the Oliver Style band, we got together with Ken in 1948. He liked George Lewis and revived archaic New Orleans was his bag, whereas classic New Orleans was our bag, and we thought, well, it doesn't really work, so it didn't.
I don't think we've had a New Orleans style trumpet player of his equal.
And finally, he managed to get, well, he got to New Orleans by joining the Merchant Navy and jumping ship at Mobile, Alabama, and going to New Orleans without a passport or a work permit.
He went over there and found all these very old boys and played with them and adopted the way they played.
There are all these legends that he made the band play slightly out of tune to get not true?
Rubbish.
No, rubbish.
Total rubbish. Ken never played out of tune. Ken never played out of tune. Ken was a wonderful ear. Sadly, he didn't know any music, because it would have been a lot better off if he had known some music.
He never punched me, threatened to. But that, as I said, was nothing to do with the guitar.
Ken Collier was the closest thing to George Lewis, I think, that you could find it on this side of the water. But I didn't know. It was interesting to someone who wasn't even nowhere near being musically savvy at that time, when a young teenager, that I would know that.
Yeah.
It was all, so it has to be intuitive.
What was amusing was that there was Ken Collier in the club. Louis Armstrong played, and I watched Ken, because Ken, he'd been the great deviator, the man that stopped jazz being jazz by killing the New Orleans tradition.
The devil.
Yes, the devil. So when he'd finished blowing wonderfully, with Humph, I think, I went over to Ken and said, "What do you think, Ken?" I said, mischievous. Ken said, "He'll do."
Also sat and listened enthralled to Big Bill Brunsey, sitting on a chair in the middle of the room, playing the guitar and talking about the blues. He was one of the first to come over, billed as the last of the Mississippi bluesmen in 1951 when he first came over, or 50. And of course, since then, there have been about 100.
We also went on tour with Big Bill Brunsey, who was a lovely man. A terrible liar, of course. He said he owned 8 farms and all that. When he died, nothing at all, but why not?
Brunsey had a big body of work, which not everyone is familiar with, where we would be in bands, playing with piano players.
Booked Brunsey for the concerts, but asked him not to play electric guitar, and also to play the old field blues, country blues.
He was living a kind of a lie, as we found out later, because one got the impression he'd come straight from the Delta into a studio and then into fame.
But that was an important lie, though, wasn't it?
An important lie, but the real truth was he came out of Chicago, where he'd sung rhythm and blues at one time. Didn't matter, did it? He could play and he could sing wonderfully.
He was, in fact, a forerunner of the Muddy Waters and the Buddy Guys and people like that.
Think about all the people that came up through Big Bill Brunsey. He was like the Art Blakey of the blues world. You know? He had Memphis Slim and the original Sonny Boy Williamson, Jazz Gillum, Big Maceo, Josh Althamer. There was so many people.
Brunsey got shown on TV too. The other thing that he was big here was because on something like Newsnight or one of those, they showed some footage, and it was so spellbinding. Really? But I think anyone that was leaning in that direction got it from there.
Big Bill Brunsey was the first thing I heard. You know, he came over and he was on 6-5 Special, I think. And I just loved the rawness of it. But he was very musical with it.
To me, the connotation was black music was acoustic and white rock and roll was electric.
Also Brownie G. Right. And I know that Brownie himself actually played in the club I was in. I was there at the time, you know, as a boy sitting at his feet, you know. That was the first time close up I'd ever seen somebody play the blues.
The blind one wanted to go for a pee. So the crippled one said, you ain't go with him, you know, we don't always aiming and so on. So at that moment he came back and said, "What are you saying?" And they had a terrible race round the table, the crippled one trying to escape from the stick of the blind one. And the room was full of quite valuable pictures and objects. It was a heart-rending moment.
'57 was at a Tharp, came with a Fender, with a solid Fender and an amp, and '58 Sonny and Brownie, and Brownie had a little amp and acoustic guitar with a pickup on it,
yes.
And of course Legend '58 Muddy Waters with an amp and electric guitar.
Sister Rosetta Thorpe was big in my life at that point.
My sister played most really good rock and roll blues guitar,
ripping into gospel songs, and she played electric guitar and had a Hammond B3 and a drummer, you know, as a part of church music, which, wow.
The thing was, Sister was at a Tharp on stage, of course, had practically a halo, but off stage she liked a brandy. She was quite randy as well. I wasn't rhyming on purpose, and behaved very badly, I'm glad to say. We all got, Mulligan was worried before we went on tour with her, but he soon wasn't. In fact, he used to have to lock his door.
We came on the old young bridge, my grandpappy and me, over the 7 seas, we did roam.
It was very much a part of my introduction to like Lonnie Donegan's Skiffle, all of that stuff. Yeah, and it was kind of on the way out by the time I got my hands on a guitar, but it was very much formative stuff for me.
Skiffle was an influence as well. I tried to play in skiffle bands when we were young.
Once I heard Lonnie Donegan, that was it. I had to pick up a guitar.
The thing about skiffle, it was an accessible music that a couple of people with guitars could...
It was sort of British, wasn't it?
It was purely British.
We played spirituals, gospel, blues, jazz, pop songs of the day.
Lonnie Donegan, when he first started, and all the hits he had, I didn't realise at the time that they were all Lead Belly songs.
Because it was only much later, in the kind of late 80s, I suddenly realised where all these songs had come from, probably 30 years later.
Well, it is a total mix of primarily Afro-American, but not exclusively.
Donegan was huge then, and the skiffle phenomenon stuff was starting then.
Was there a comparable movement in the States?
Well, there was a comparable movement, yes, which was just plain folk song. The American sort of student age generation discovered their own folk music.
I mean, like Peter, Paul and Mary?
Yes, and the Kingston Trio and people like that.
In the spring of '55, Jack and June arrived in London to find a burgeoning and surprisingly passionate folk scene. Would-be folkies were putting a new spin on traditional tunes. This do-it-yourself take on folk music became known as skiffle.
Skiffle ain't worth shit. I don't even want to talk about it. It's disgusting. It was some half-assed non-musicians who thought it would be a cute idea to buy a guitar, learn one chord, and sing, "Takes a worried man to sing a worried soul."
Were you influenced by people like Ramblin' Jack Elliott? Did you meet him when he came to London?
Yeah.
Did he make an impact?
No. Next.
Really not?
No.
Yeah.
I thought it was a faker. Well, I'm a Woody Guthrie man, you know.
Sure.
So somebody who does imitations of Woody Guthrie doesn't impress me much. I do that.
I think Lonnie Donegan took his name from Lonnie Johnson, yes. And it would be Alonso, would have been his name, actually, in Spanish, Alonso.
Turned her face a little, then turned her head a while. But everybody knows she's only putting on a style. Right? It's not a folk song, it's a pop song.
Actually, since I've been going a lot to Middle Tennessee, I've realised now where a lot of these skiffle tunes came from. They were renditions of bluegrass tunes, which originally came out from to the Appalachians via Scottish and Irish settlers. Although the songs were rewritten, songs like Down in the Mines and Rock on a Line.
Ken Collier was did the skiffle thing in the intermission or whatever of the trad jazz band thing, and then when Chris Barber got his own band, and Chris started doing it, then Lonnie Donegan was part of that. He was a banjo player, but he played guitar and the skiffle stuff. So all this was evolving out of what you call jazz then. All it came under the heading of jazz.
A couple of years ago, I went with Van Morrison to Belfast, and we put on what you called a skiffle session, skiffle concert, right? And when we got there, we found, quite coincidentally, that Dr. John was working around the corner, gave him a whistle, and he came roaring round, and Lonnie Donegan, my God, Rock on a Line, the greatest record was ever goddamn made, and you started me off. I said, I started you off. We got this right.
There was a kind of hybrid between skiffle and traditional jazz that occasionally flirted with blues, and that was also very interesting.
The first real British blues record I think I heard was Humphrey Lyttelton's Bad Penny Blues, which was an instrumental, and Johnny Parker, the pianist in the band, played a fantastic boogie woogie on that.
It doesn't stop. Muted trumpet. And apparently they did that song like that because Harper's band didn't show up or something. So it was just his rhythm section. Exactly.
I said to Johnny Parker, the piano player at the time, let's do that thing we play in the club. When I heard it, I was horrified. Had I heard a test pressing of it before I'd gone on holiday, I'd have said, I'm not having that put out.
Yeah, he said, it was only a few musicians there, so I had to make it sound big.
Left hand of the piano was distorted, so it had a sort of bonging noise, bong, 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 bong. The drums were heavily offbeat brushes, and the brushes were heavily over-recorded. And it was actually balanced in the studio by Joe Meek, who later became famous in pop circles.
Yeah, Joe Meek. So, because I recorded with him in the early 60s, and he was saying that, to Mike, so that's why the piano was so loud.
I've always referred to him as the first of the creative sound mixers. In other words, he was doing a whole lot of things that I wouldn't have approved of at the time. But when I came back from holiday and found it was number 19 in the top 20, I kind of shut up.
With Joe Meek, to each his own. I mean, I've got nothing against I don't hold it against it, but I mean, whatever. But when it gets in the way of the music, instead of getting the music done, there's something else. It's like for good-looking girls, it's the casting couch. You know what I mean? With heterosexual men. Because he was like, oh, you got a bit of a, I said, yeah, those jeans fit you well, don't they? I said, well, look, yeah. I said, oh, it looks like you've got a bit of a... And I said, yeah, well, it serves its purpose, you know what I mean? So it was all that, and I thought, what the fuck is he on about? So then it was carrying on, and then he was saying that he was going to get these tapes released, EMI was going to have it. We went to EMI, they didn't know anything about it. Then I went to Decca, they didn't know anything. So then I went for him, and I went back up to the thing, and I said, you fuck. So I went across the desk at him, and it was the first time I ever saw anybody fly. I mean, it's unbelievable. He was like Peter Pan. Next thing I knew, he was 1 minute he was standing behind the desk, and the next minute he was sitting on the mantelpiece. How the fuck did he get up there?
Bad Penny Blues. Bad Penny, yeah, that was Johnny Parker solo out of Bad Penny Blues, was used on the Legendado, wasn't it? Yeah, quite right, yeah.
Note for note, it was the same kind of feel. Yeah. It was a 4-bar thing, but with 8 to a bar overlaid on the top.
we turned up at the rehearsal room, and Eddie Cochran was sitting there with his leather waistcoat, leather trousers, and his Gretsch guitar, and his cowboy boots. And Eddie said, "Anybody here ever heard of Ray Charles?" And I don't think anybody put their hand up. I hadn't heard him. And he said, "Well, this is one tune I want to do in my show." And he went... Started that Ray Charles lick on What Did I Say, and we all went, "What was that?"
Hey, mama, don't treat me wrong. Come and love you, daddy, all night long, all night long. Hey, hey.
And Eddie Cochran really introduced the music of Ray Charles to the masses of this country on that tragic tour when he was killed.
Well, because John Lee Hooker was the first one to come over for a club tour. He'd previously been over on one of the blues packages in concert, but this was when he came over to do a tour with us. That was a big success.
We backed Muddy Waters, John Lee Hooker, T-Bone Walker, Champion Jack Dupree, and Memphis Slim, Jimmy Witherspoon.
At the time I was with John, I was asked to play by Mike Vernon. I was asked to play with Muddy and Otis Spann, and they came in to London to do, I think, like a promotional tour or something. And that was unbelievable, and they were in their heyday, and they had these big silk suits on, and man, I was just gobsmacked. I could hardly move.
Had a pretty little girl, but I lose my baby boy, ain't that bad? Had a pretty little girl, I lose my baby boy, ain't that bad? You can't spend what you ain't got. Can't lose some little girl that you ain't never had.
But I was called to the session, and everything was in the key of F sharp or B natural. And in those days, I could only play like 3 or 4 keys. C, G, F, and having to play with guitar players, I could play a bit in E and A.
As long as I kept good time, that's all. I felt really proud of myself just doing that, because I never had the technique, and it never actually interested me. The only technique that I have is just by default, because I played so long, or when someone shouts change to something in a chorus, I still don't know what a chorus is. I'm like playing with Sonny Boy when they just change, and believe me, they're right and you're wrong.
Had money in the bank, but I got busted people, ain't that bad?
And I saw Muddy a few years later, and I just mentioned to him, I said, "Oh, that recording session, man," I said, "it was terrible. Everything was in F sharp or B." I said, "I was very uncomfortable. I'm sorry about that." He said, "Shit, man." He said, "You should have told me how to move the capo." But you were so in awe of somebody like Muddy Waters, you didn't say, "Hey, man, can you change the key?"
And a sweet little home, but it got went down, people ain't that bad. That's my own fault. People ain't that bad. You can't spend what you ain't got. Can't lose something good you ain't never had.
Well, T-Bone Walker did a tour with us. He was the second one who did an actual complete tour, and then I did scattered performances here and there with Sonny Boy Williamson.
Sonny Boy Williamson came to play with the Yardbirds, and Sonny Boy stayed on in Europe for quite a while, and because Giorgio had this band, the Yardbirds, it seemed like a good idea to put the two things together, and that was a hardcore experience, and quite frightening. And I mean, it almost could have turned me off. I think what was life-saving about it for me was that I was not a huge fan of Sonny Boy in the first place, and because I was like a bit of a mouth around this stuff too, I think we didn't hit it off very well.
More with some musicians than others. I mean, Johnny Hooker was notorious for doing all kinds of, which actually was part of what made his music his music.
It's kind of rough because, you know, he's got no idea, no concept of chord changes or where they come or anything like that, so you really have to be on your toes. All he really had to know was the key of E and just watch carefully, also like intuitively feel where he's going to make the changes.
Yeah. But John Lee wouldn't give you a clue. You had to hear it and feel it. But that was the magic of the original Delta blues, because they just changed whenever they felt like it. They weren't limited to a structure. But to play with these guys was an education, because they took us right back to the roots again.
Love letter straight from your heart. Keep us so near while apart. I'm not alone in the night when I can have all the love you write. I memorize every line. I kiss the name that you signed, and darling, then I read again right from the start. Love letter straight from your heart.
Jumping with my boss, sit in the city. Jumping with my boss, sit in the city. Mr. President of the DJ committee.
So I'd heard all that before we started working down the Flamingo. So we had some of that kind of stuff and a bit of Ray Charles under our belt. So when we started down the Flamingo and all the Black American guys were in there, they thought, this is home, boy.
I could go to the West End, to the Singing Club, when I was 15 years old, and to the Flamingo when I was 17, 18 years old.
We landed ourselves a job round the corner at the Flamingo Club, which was a jazz club. But on weekends, it was rented out by a guy that later became our manager. His name was Rick Gunnell. and Rick used to put on all-night sessions as a jazz club with an R&B band playing for dancing. The place was really frequented by black American GIs that were stationed over here in the Air Force.
The best place, the place that I was scared to go until I actually was in bands, was the Flamingo.
One night would be Larry Williams and John Watson. Next night would be John Lee Hooker. Next night would be Howling Wolf.
There was a great sort of West Indian contingent and night people, club people that worked in other clubs until 3 a.m. and then they'd come down to Flamingo because we'd start at midnight and end at 6 a.m. every Friday, every Saturday. And on Sundays play afternoon sessions for the stragglers that couldn't get back to base.
Next weekend would be Chuck Berry, Nina Simone. You could go and see all these people and sit there and actually learn your trade.
Tell her the shape I'm in. Please run, my mama, and tell her the shape I'm in. And tell her
The Flamingo was an established jazz club. There was a baby grand piano in there for the jazz musicians. They wouldn't let me play it because I was playing Fats Domino.
It was just a sweaty place that seemed to never close, particularly in the hours of darkness.
People like John Mayall would drive down from Manchester on a weekend to hang out in the club and play in the club and sit in at the club before John got a chance to bring his own musicians down from Manchester.
It was primarily a black club, you know. It was like mostly West Indians would go in there maybe to listen to blue beat or ska or jazz or whatever. But it was like, and it was all night, you know. Most nights, I think it would go pretty late, and then on the weekends it would be all night, and people would get hurt.
You could do 10 gigs a week, you know, just based around the Flamingo and just around the London area.
And was it always pretty full?
Oh yeah, it's packed out.
There was a great Jamaican disc jockey called Count Suckle who had a Jamaican club in Carnaby Street, of all places. They called it the Roaring Twenties. And it was just a Jamaican club. We opened it as a band with Count Suckle's records. And Suckle had this fantastic record collection. You know, James Brown's Night Train. He had the mixture. He had a great source in Memphis that used to send all the latest black American imports. And plus he had all the West Indian stuff.
The Roaring Twenties, seeing a lot of ska music in the early days. Flamingo.
We was in the Flamingo one night playing, and someone said to me, "Did you see that black guy sitting in the front of the row looking at me?" Well, they were all black. They're all GIs. I used to say they're all black GIs. They come down for the weekend, you know. No, it was Otis Redding. I said, "Go away, Otis Redding. Get off." So I'm sitting in the dressing room and the door opens and Otis Redding walks in. Comes up to me and says, "You are a great singer." I said, "Dear me, it's Otis Redding." He is. So, Otis, how you doing? He said, "I want you to be on I'm doing a TV show next week called Ready Steady Go, so I want you to be my guest." And I said, pinch me, I think this is all not happening, you know.
I've been loving you too long to stop rotten now.
My manager and I opened a club in Brixton called the Ram Jam Club. And yeah, and I saw Otis, I saw that Stax Revue on a Sunday afternoon. I biked over, I cycled from Chelsea over the river to Brixton to see that Sunday afternoon session. It was fantastic.
Very exciting, because I come from near Guildford, you know, country boy coming up and probably sleeping on Charing Cross Station, you know, and stuff like that, but very exciting.
And I hated the name Georgie Fame, because I've been saddled with this name by Larry Parnes as one of his exotic sort of rock and roll stable of singers. But when we went down to Flamingo and the GIs were saying, "Hey, Fame, mother," it sounded okay. It sounded hip.
In return, you give up yours before we think.
Straight away. Yeah, okay, I need to look at you again.
What will we do later on? What kind of life would we have, just in case we both go wrong? I would give up my woman, you would give up your man. But it don't make sense to.
The whole thing kind of took off for me when I met John Mayall. I mean, I had already gone a long way down the road, but he had a massive collection.
Did he?
Of records. Lived in Blackheath. I lived in a sort of wardrobe in the top of his house. And I would spend all day just going through his record collection, listening to stuff and deciding what the band was going to play, God bless him.
Oh, please. Yeah, we need lyrics. We're going to do this again.
That you want me.
I was off listening to Ray Charles and Mos Allison, and then I started to hear people like Oscar Brown Jr.
There was a Muddy Waters EP. I think there was a Little Walter EP. And then maybe Josh White.
Josh White. Yeah, as a matter of fact, Josh White singing Hush of the Rising Sun.
Really?
Yeah. And the B-side was Strange Fruit.
And art college kids who were these enthusiasts, so they would take me down to record shops and give me records.
Well, when I heard of Sarah Vaughan, she was my favourite. Well, one of my... Jerry Southern was my favourite jazz singer.
I started to hear some of the early VJ recordings, John Lee Hooker, Jimmy Reed,
Jerry Lewis, Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, Little Richard.
Great guitar players, that was what really caught my ear, you know. It was Cliff Gallup with Gene Vincent, and, James Burton, who played with Ricky Nelson.
Sonny Terry Brown, who did Lightning Hopkins. And, of course, Ray Charles, who was a big discovery.
My mother told me, before she passed away, said, son, when I'm gone, don't forget to pray.
Don't forget.
There'll be hard times.
There'll be hard times.
Hard times. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And who knows better than I?
And so I got caught up with Monk and Mingus and all of those guys in the same period, and was listening to it all at the same time, you know. And I would buy a John Lee Hooker album on Riverside and someone, you know, a Lee Morgan album on Riverside, and it all, to me, it was all the same thing.
I had a woman, Lord, who's always around.
You know, he's gone up the octave.
I lost my money. She put me down.
After that, I heard Leadbelly and Lonnie Johnson.
In my collection, I had a whole lot of people. I had Mahalia Jackson in the gospel field, and John Lee Hooker, Memphis Slim, and Muddy Waters.
There's a Canal Street Blues, Dipper Mouth Blues. So I bought those as well, you see. Yeah, as long as it had the name Blues on it. I bought it.
We would find some list somewhere, or some American record store, where we could ride off and get lists of stuff, and we'd kind of take pot luck.
I got them through a magazine called Vintage Jazz Mart, which was for sale or auction thing, you know, private collectors. And I mainly got them through there.
The first actual long-playing record I ever owned as a 14, 15-year-old kid was a Fats Domino LP with a lot of great tunes on it, you know.
I'm going to the river on the young boat and drown.
My parents
parents bought me a record player one Christmas, and there was 2 records that came with it, and they came via a seaman who lived downstairs to me and was always going to the U.S.
You know, if somebody had been to America, they'd always bring back a blueser.
I was given some blues records, 3 or 4 blues albums, and I was studying those and finding out what I liked.
Whoa, tell me, baby, stay that night. Why don't you hear me crying?
At art school, you know, somebody told me on the folk festival, the Blues album, and Buddy playing just the most amazing stuff.
The Muddy Waters, Buddy Guy, Howlin' Wolf,
Sure.
dark blue cover. Sonny Boy Williamson. Sonny Boy Williamson sings "Bring It On Home," and Howlin' Wolf sings "Sugar Mama," and that's got Buddy Guy on it singing "Worried Blues" and "Don't Know Which Way to Go."
Booker T and the MGs. Green Onions, I'd never heard that.
Yeah.
That style of playing. It just happens to be that record is a milestone in most rock and roll, isn't it?
We used to have record listening parties, you know, on Saturday nights, and go all the way through the night, and just listening to all. Because I used to get the. This is when LPs were around, and I used to get the American imports, and we get all the latest Horace Silver stuff, and Errol Garner, and Cannonball Adderley, and all these things.
So listen
Come
to
to a new one
everything.
here, with the cardboard covers, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And the cardboard mistake and stuff.
This is the real thing, you know, and all the prestige stuff, and the Riverside, you know.
Sitting on top of the world. Oh yeah, it's an extra. It's like an extra bar, extra 2 bars.
That's more playing harmonica, I think.
Yeah, smoke.
And then you use James Fox.
Sitting on top of the world.
Another great source was American Forces Network. Again, every house had a pretty good radio, and you could tune into AFN, which was being from Frankfurt.
I used to hear the American Forces Network. They had their own radio program.
This is Willis Conover from Washington, D.C. Unlike for us, Washington, D.C. was another planet.
So I got all day. There's this great input of American folk music.
I used to send requests for jazz records into the Martha Dime thing on the AFM. The Buck Johnson and Kid Ory and Louis Armstrong.
They call it Stormy Monday. They tell me Tuesdays are just as bad. Yes, they do. They call it Stormy Monday. They tell me Tuesdays are just as bad. They tell me Wednesday's no good. Thursdays are just as sad.
Stormy Monday Blues, Part 1 and Part 2. We were doing a session for Chris Blackwell from Ireland Records, Guy Stevens. And while they were setting up all the equipment and all that, they just said to us, just play a couple of numbers so we can get the mic sort of tested out, you know. Yeah. And we just did Stormy Monday Blues. And then we did some other things. And then a couple of months later, I saw this come out under Little Joe Cook. And I thought, they never told me it was going to be under Little Joe Cook. They never did in those days. It was just it, you know.
The eagle flies on a Friday. It's on Saturday. I draw my pay. The eagle flies on a Friday. It's on Saturday. I draw my pay.
And then Vicky Wickham got hold of it for Ready Steady Go, and she got in touch with the office, the Rick Gunning office, and said we'd like to book Little Joe Cook for Ready Steady Go. And they said he's not available. And they said why not? They said we can't get in touch with him. And then they got in touch with Ireland Records and said we want this guy on the. But when they said it was Chris Farlow, you couldn't have Little Joe Cook because it's a pseudonym for Chris Farlow. Yeah. They didn't believe it. They said, oh come on, don't be silly. And it was us, me and Albert and the band.
'Cause I like to sing the blues. I also like to sing rock and roll. Let's have some guitar playing here. Yeah.
I was in America a little while ago, last year, and I was introduced to a guy, a black blues musician. I forgot his name now. Well known. And the guy said, I'd like to introduce you to an English singer. He said, oh yeah, what's his name? He said, Chris Farlow. He said, Chris Farlow? Damn, he said, I know 2 Chris Farlows. And I looked at him and I said, 2 Chris Farlows? He said, no, Chris Farlow. He said, yeah, you're Chris Farlow. He said, I know another Chris Farlow. He's saying Stormy Monday Blues on Sue. I said, that's me. And he looked at me and he went, no, this guy's black.
Well, whatever I'm gonna do, they call it Stormy Monday Blues. Stormy Monday.
So this has been a very important record for me, and I think for all of us, because it's regarded as one of the great blues records ever made in England.
Started with a cheap acoustic. I played for a year, borrowing guitars from friends, whatever I could get my hands on, But then the first decent guitar was 1958, I think, Christmas of '58. My folks bought me a Hofner archtop guitar.
About 11, 12. With a 2-string guitar, I couldn't afford the other strings. But it was a shop-made guitar, which hard to believe when you looked at it, but it was.
I took up the guitar when I was about 9.
I guess I would have had a Hofner Senator.
It was an acoustic guitar, but we used to stick microphones behind it, you know, and then put that through sometimes a homemade amplifier.
I started off on ukulele because the action on my father's guitar was so high.
Yeah.
You know, you needed a pair of pliers to press the strings down, you know, so ukulele was when I started off with the George Formby do-it-yourself method.
Road, I bought my first guitar, Spanish guitar, I put steel strings on and they brought the bridge off. Somebody took me back to his house and played me some Lonnie Johnson. I thought it was the best thing I ever heard.
I think the first electric guitar I had was a Hofner.
And then I bought myself a solid with 3 pickups and a tremolo, and I thought it was the same guitar that Buddy Holly played. It turned out it was a cheap imitation. It was the Grazioso or something.
When I went in the army and was in Korea, I bought a 6-string guitar, and I added the bottom 2 strings.
Oh, harmony. I had a couple of harmonies. One was a semi-acoustic one. One was a more of a solid.
Eric Clapton brought the Gibson into me anyway. There's Paul. There was the Gretsch. Eddie Cochran. What did he play? Eddie Cochran. Was it a Gretsch or it was like a Gretsch or maybe a Gibson? It was a Gretsch.
I mean, you couldn't get hold of American instruments at that time. You know, you just bought what you could. You know.
Yeah, it was like actual fish colour, and they called it cherry. The colour was cherry, but it used to fade, and then it would look like there's a lot of fish actually involved in that guitar.
There was some other odd kind of European makes, which sometimes if you crank that through an amp, you actually got quite an interesting sound.
We only had an old Vox amplifier. It was an old thing, though. A great big light on it, like an ignition light.
Scotty Moore's guitar playing on Trying to Get to You, The Lieber and Stoller, My Baby Left Me. I loved Scotty Moore's guitar playing. I really would like to, if I were Bruce playing nothing else, I really would try and take it up with Scotty Moore somehow.
The first time I heard it that way was with Freddie King, and a friend had Hideaway on the single. But the single had the B-side of Hideaway was I Love the Woman, with a guitar solo in it that was single note and bend, lots of bending things, and almost like rhapsodic in its composition. It was perfect, and that became the new Holy Grail, for me.
And you'd hear these records doing all these bends, and how are they doing that? But we eventually figured out that they had, they had very light strings.
Well, they were bending strings, way back in Johnny and the Otis and the Johnny Otis, that whatever it was. And right in the middle of it, he goes. Well, I thought that's it. That's what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Milk Car Blues, and I don't know who wrote that or recorded that, because Eddie Cochran was the first guy I heard it. And he had that kind of T-Bone Walker introduction on guitar. And I thought, wow, that's real blues guitar playing.
You could tell that there was something going on there. It wasn't... It was... a major, sort of minor, major bend.
I would take the guitar every time I pick it up and trill my hand. A lot of the kids think I push up and down, but I don't. I just trill it like that.
Alexis Corner and Cyril Davis kind of kicked off the thing at the Marquee, mainly an experimental type of situation, really, in the trad-dominated club world.
When Alexis formed the new Blues Incorporated, he took Graham Bond, Dick Extell-Smith, Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce with him, and they were all part of the regular Friday night jam session jazz group in the Flamingo Club.
Was that thing of like seeing an English guy playing an electric. The first time I saw an English guy playing electric guitar was with Alexis.
I picked up the Melody Maker one day, and the headline was, you know, Alexis brings amps into the club, you know, and this deafening noise, which in actual fact was probably one Marshall amplifier.
Like all you pretty women, lead me by my hand till the whole world knows about the she comes.
And he had a K, right, and I got a K.
Yeah.
And covered it in Fablon because I didn't like, you know, black Fablon because I didn't like the colour.
When Eric Clapton came in the band, of course, that revolutionised the whole thing, because he was a person who knew the music thoroughly and knew the feel of it and had the right touch that nobody else seemed to have at that time.
Well, I thought Clapton was a great blues player. I didn't think he was God, despite what people wrote on walls. But Clapton is God, they used to write. I don't know what God thought about it. But no, he was a very, very good blues player.
I had a little following from a band called the Yardbirds, you know that band, and I left in a very public way, you know, sort of threw my toys out of the pram because they wanted a hit. And I was very, very conscious of having a mission, like a blues mission. And so I kind of said, well, I'm quitting, you know, I'm out. And then John asked me to join. I had like a 3-week period or a month where I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and then John called me.
Where had the mission come from?
Interesting, I don't know. I don't know. I felt like I was convinced at some point in my teens that if I didn't do it, no one would, or someone had to do it, and I'd been chosen, you know.
Really?
Yeah.
You were so passionate about it.
Yeah, and arrogant too.
Yeah.
You know, I was like a self-appointed ambassador of the blues to this country.
Yeah.
And was very judgmental about anybody that wasn't doing it the way I thought it should be done.
In the early 60s, there was absolutely no acceptance of any other kind of music. I mean, I know now people get degrees in jazz and all kinds of things. But in the early 60s, you know, I distinctly remember being asked at music college what kind of music I liked. And so I said, well, I do like Powell Hindemith and Igor Stravinsky, but I also like Fats Domino and Ray Charles. And the teacher said, well, you've got a choice, either forget about that or go.
We arrived at Birmingham University to play at one of these university dances, one of our first gigs outside of London, I think. And we were carrying the gear upstairs to get to the place where we were playing, and there was a band on stage already, and it was a Spencer Davis group, and Steve was singing Georgia on My Mind. And I'll never forget it, the sound of that voice and his delivery.
Georgia, yeah. Oh, Georgia. A song of love comes as sweet and clear. Yes, not to define.
As a musician, let's say, and probably as a piano player as well, and having learnt the harmony and playing E flat and all that kind of stuff, I was really more interested in the music rather than the whole social change which that was the massive thing, really.
Black cloud crossed my mind. You misrun my soul. Feel so suicidal. Even hate my rock and roll. I'm rolling. Wanna die. If I ain't dead already. Woo, girl, it's
The Beatles was doing what they call rock and roll, a different type of thing, but I could still feel and hear blues in what they were doing.
I think the Beatles had a lot of influence on encouraging people who didn't know how to read or write music. They could pick up an instrument and make some music and actually be accepted. And all it took was for them to get to the top of the charts. Said, whoa, it is possible, we'll have a go.
The Beatles were a little more sophisticated, I guess, and they were writing their own material based on American culture. But the way they took it back to America with its innocent charm, if you like, and its freshness, was an eye-opener, and that took that music into mainstream America, whereas before it had been the lid had been kept on.
I mean, the Beatles did in their early days sing a few blues and so on, but on the whole they were very inventive. The Stones less so, what some people used to call the Thames Valley cotton fields.
I just wanna make love to you, baby. Love to you, baby. Sweet love to you, baby. Love to you, baby.
The Stones were a straight-ahead blues band, basically.
Jagger had a genuine feeling for it, and so did Richard, and their early music, I think, is pretty powerful, and definitely black influence, but it doesn't sound like it. It's not imitative quite. And there's a few comments when they went to America from black artists, say, it's fine, white boys playing this stuff, more people are going to listen to us, which was probably true.
Oh, I'm gonna get high. I'm gonna get high. Sure with my night. Well, stick by with my reefer. I ain't gonna be messing around with no cocaine.
British blues with John Mayall, I think he's the master of it. He's about the first that I can think that really brought it out. But then I started hearing many others. When Cream came, that was it.
I had met Jack and Ginger on and off around the Ealing Club and the Marquee. But I admired these guys tremendously, and for a start because they were a kind of a generation before me, and they were on stage when I was in the audience, at the Marquee. So these were the real thing. I mean, it's like back to that again. I was like and even in the band when it came into fruition, I kind of stayed in that place really. I was in the audience really for most of their shenanigans.
By then, the whole rock blues thing was in full swing on a worldwide basis, in other words, several years before, when not many people knew about it, now it was the music, it dominated everything.
cream were enormous in America.
Yeah.
And thanks to Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce, and Ginger Baker, in that band in particular, who drew from a varied blues influence between them and jazz.
Yeah.
They went out and played it live to American audiences.
Early 1968, that I first went to America with Traffic as a three-piece with Jim Capaldi and Chris Wood. And so, of course, I think the idea there is I really wanted to stop trying to copy this music.
We were taken into the depths of Chicago. These little white guys. Mike Vernon, who was in charge of our record label, Blue Horizon, arranged for us to go to record at the Chess Studios. And Willie Dixon, Buddy Guy was there, J.T. Brown, the horn player from Elmore James, Shaky Horton.
Being in Stax Vault recording session, watching Otis Redding record Day Tripper, Sam and Dave cut Hold On, I'm Coming, playing with an interracial band, or white, black band.
And Jeremy playing with J.T. Brown doing the brass section behind, I mean, it was like living out the wildest fantasies that you could possibly want. Peter had a confidence about what he played and felt that he could play, but we were all thrilled.
I had a woman, Lord, who always hung around, but when I lost all my money, you know, she put me down, talking about hard times. You know about hard times, and who knows better than I? Yeah, Lord, you know that one of these days there'll be no more sorrow when I pass away. Talking about hard times, I said no more hard times, and who knows better than I?
As long as you sounded real, they didn't mind if you were white or, you know, whatever. As long as it was real. And I thought, that's great, because I thought I might have gotten a bit of flack, you know, with singing some of the tunes, you know, and being white.
To be blunt, for us to play their music in studios that they recorded those songs in could have gone horribly wrong. It truly didn't. But there was a moment when there was a testing of our situation. I do remember that. And then suddenly, and I hope it, in fact, I feel it had something to do with that they were blown away as to how this little bunch of English kids could sound, and J.T. Brown turned around and go, and I know genuinely was saying, that's pretty damn cool, you know, because it was so heartfelt from us bunch.
When they would do tunes that had been recorded by, shall we say, Big Boy Crudup, Muddy Waters, and so on, whoever wrote the tune, man, ought to have been glad, because it became a hit. And it was sold to many more people than they were ever able to sell it to.
That was the beginning of those fantastic bills where you get the Freddie Kings, you know, playing with Richie Havens and Fleetwood Mac and Janis Joplin.
And I noticed then that white America started paying attention to blues. And so it started opening a lot of doors that had been closed to us.
Like Albert King said, he was staggered by the Fillmore was packed, you know, and he just had no concept of how it could be that what he was playing could be appreciated by so many people, you know. And white people, you know. Where did they come from?
And we were having fun. We had a lot of fun. But musically, I kept stepping back and going, this isn't it. This isn't really what I want to do. Or this isn't what I hold up. I mean, this isn't working to the principles that I've been following all this time. And consequently, when I heard music from Big Pink, I thought, well, this is a contemporary band that's approaching where the blues can be taken. And it doesn't have to be like because what we're doing is starting to become a bit of a circus, playing in places where all the audience was stoned, you know, doing tours of America, you know, the Fillmore and the Fillmore East, and all kinds of places where, you know, we were encouraged to get to do just silly things. I mean, rambling, meaningless, self-indulgent music, really. I wanted to take it seriously. My music was a very serious thing to me, and I felt like I was starting to betray myself.
Tell me how long, oh baby, how long? Later that evening, is the leaning train been gone? Train been gone.
My definition of it would be that it was someone making music purely for themselves, in a way, and without any conscious effort to be communicative.
A branch of folk music, that is to say, it's a rather natural expression rather than a contrived one.
It's an uplifting music. I wouldn't necessarily say it's happy, I mean, but it's definitely uplifting, energizing, all those kind of things that you come away from it saying, whoa, that was great.
Well, the blues is so many things, but basically speaking, it's developed into a 12-bar format with fairly simple chord progressions in the first place, which have been extended, you know, as jazz has got more modern.
What it really means is that the singer or player is actually playing from his heart. Yes. You know, it's like he's singing the truth.
Anybody can play it. It has the magical structure of 3 chords, which you can tie into earth, sun, moon, man, woman, God.
Life as we live it today, life as we lived it in the past, and life as I believe we'll live it in the future. It has to do with people. I think that's one of the reasons the kids picks up. It has to do with people, places, and things.
It's kind of like religion, really, blues music. I've only recently sort of started to get the hang of it, you know, what it means, yeah. Like I say, it's a story. When you say Bill Broomsey, listen to his words, listen to his lyrics, or are you listening to the guitar player? And someone who doesn't play guitar will listen to the words and see what they might get it just like that and sort of understand what it is.
It's 2 lines, which are the same. First line more or less repeated, and the third one which completes the sense. But I think it's more a feeling.
I guess it's a feel, isn't it? It's an emotion. We didn't even know the words.
we couldn't understand a lot of the lyrics to what these guys were singing, but the whole feel.
There's no black, no white. It's got to do with, it has to do with the truth. The blues is the truth.
It's a kind of a plea. It's a musical plea for something. It's a way of expressing a need or a want.
Could and almost should be a part of all music, and if it isn't, then I feel that the music is somehow lacking.
We're still sitting here talking about something that's so real, so alive, just when you think it's off the radar. I don't think it ever will be, because of the absolute power that it has.
It brings a tear into my when I begin to realize, I cried so much, since you've been gone.
I'm absolutely sure that if you asked a black blues musician whether his life was enhanced, I think they'd say yeah. I mean, that would probably be the better person to ask. I don't know for myself how far the ripples spread, but I mean, Robert Johnson is a household name now.
I just sit and cry. Ooh, just like a child.
The United States suddenly started paying tribute to a wonderful legacy of the roots of rock and roll and blues, and by this reverse sort of triggering mechanism that came from all of those things in England, the bands going back. And hey, you see the Rolling Stones when they first landed, they're all talking about muddy waters and people, and people are going like, who the hell's he?
That you're gonna be home soon. It's alright. I believe I'm gonna drown in my own tears.
The Brits took what the Americans culturally threw into the trash bin. There was a definite move to trash that culture and keep it away from white kids.
Oh, some rain. I know some rain is gonna fall.
There was probably a feeling in the early days of blues, English blues, of wanting to bring this music to people's attention, to show them what a interesting, wonderful form it was.
That it just keeps raining, raining, and raining, and raining, and raining. More and more. Why don't you come on?
Without it, I don't think American black musicians and black blues players would have really made it to the extent that they have. Because if you talk to any of them, they'll say, well, these English guys, they came over and they spread the word about us, and they, they made a larger awareness on the world scale.
'Cause if you don't think that you're gonna be home soon, it's alright. I believe I'm gonna drown in my own tears.
He gave
give people a chance to play and to be somebody and to do something with their music. People who were disregarded and worth nothing at the time over there, as the traditional jazz revival had. It gave people, you know, Americans, something to feel they'd done something, you know, to be important, to the music to be important.
Yes, I'm gonna drown in my own tears.
Black American culture, if you want to call it, which it is, the greatest art form that came out of America, really. Modern America.
Sing it song tonight, sing it song tonight.
If it wasn't for the British musicians, a lot of us black musicians in America would still be catching the hell that we caught long before. So thanks to them, thanks to all of you guys, you opened doors that I don't think would have been open in my lifetime. Thank you very much.
My own, my own tears. Good God Almighty.
That was all right, except for that last little bit. Did I not give any indication of?
That was
natural.
Yeah.
Listen, so you definitely got a